Hi friends, Susan Storm here, founder of Psychology Junkie and a certified MBTI practitioner. Today I want to talk about the ISFJ personality type. We want to learn what makes them tick, what excites them, what stresses them. Let's get started. So first, let's talk about those ISFJ letters. What do they mean? I in ISFJ stands for introvert. ISFJs get their energy from the inner world of thoughts, ideas, and reflections. They need a lot of time to themselves to unpack their thoughts, to understand how they feel about things, and a lot of excessive socializing and interaction and tasks in the outside world can leave them feeling very drained and energy depleted. The S in ISFJ stands for sensor. ISFJs are focused on the real world, on concrete, tangible experiences, more than they're focused on something abstract or conceptual. This doesn't mean they never have interest in those things, but the real world facts and real experiences that they've lived are generally something that they trust more and that they're more focused on. The F in ISFJ stands for feeling. Feeling is how ISFJs approach decisions. They approach decisions from their heart. How is this decision going to impact people? What emotions are going to be affected by this decision? And next we have J. The J in ISFJ stands for judging. This means that ISFJs like having a plan. They like knowing what's going to happen and having a consistent routine. They don't really like it when their schedule is really open-ended and there's not a really clear idea of what's going to happen, or when they have to be spontaneous. So we've just scratched the surface of what ISFJs are really about here. Let's take the next step and go deeper by exploring their cognitive functions. What are cognitive functions, you might be thinking? These are the mental tools that you have at your disposal as you go through life. Now, they're not actual tools. You don't reach into a box and say, I'm going to use this cognitive function today. It's just a way of expressing how you process the world, how you make decisions, what information you prioritize versus which information you don't prioritize. So let's start with the dominant function. The dominant function for ISFJs is introverted sensing. But before we get into what introverted sensing is, let's talk about what the dominant function actually does. Your dominant function is the one you rely on the most in your life. It's the hero of your personality type. When you're in a situation where you have to lead the charge and really help people, and you really feel confident in how you're doing that, you're probably using your dominant function. The dominant function takes the least energy expenditure of all the other functions to use. Think of it as your preferred hand. So I'm right-handed, so I prefer my right hand. It's easier for me to sign my name with my right hand, but that doesn't mean I never use my left hand. So introverted sensing is kind of like the right hand, if you're right-handed, of the ISFJ personality type. And introverted sensing is all about past impressions and concrete details. But as ISFJs go through life, they filter their current experience through a lens of past experiences. So they might be driving through a town and immediately visualize what the town looked like 20 years ago or 5 years ago, and immediately be able to compare and contrast how it looks now with what happened before. And they're very interested in preserving the traditions and the details and the lessons that they've gathered throughout life, and bringing those experiences and those traditions into the future. Introverted sensing is highly attuned to details. So I've noticed with introverted sensing types that when they walk into a room, they're going to be the first to notice when the furniture has been rearranged or something has changed in the room. They're very conscious of colors, textures, patterns in the world around them that they can see and that they might want to modify to make more beautiful. It's these simple pleasures and these simple, beautiful things in life that really draw them in, because when you add all these simple pleasures up and all these small details up, it really amounts to something beautiful, and it can really amount to something very meaningful. So here's an example of how introverted sensing could work. Imagine that you're walking through your friend's backyard and you happen to spot an apple tree. As you see this apple tree, you're immediately taken back to an experience you had when you were a child where you were climbing your grandmother's apple tree. And you remember exactly how it felt, how the texture of the bark felt on your hands, how the texture of the apple felt, how everything smelled. And then you're taken to a picture of your grandmother peeling the apples and making an apple pie. And you remember exactly how that smelled when it was in the oven, how it tasted. You remember the emotions that were with you during that time that you spent with your grandmother. And you might find yourself being transported back in time as if you're in a mental time machine to the past, as you see this one apple tree in your present moment. So ISFJ has this kind of time traveling ability to instantly recall these vivid memories from the past and bring them into the present, to give your life a sense of meaning, continuity, and to preserve those moments that many of us just hurry on by and forget. So the introverted sensing type often carries on these rituals into the future. This might mean that as you grow up, we'll take that same person who is walking through their friend's yard. As that person grows up, they might decide, you know what, I want to carry on the tradition of making a homemade apple pie from scratch for my children. So they might take their children apple picking every fall and then make apple pie together as a family every fall. And they might carry that on, and then their children might carry it on, and then their children might carry it on. For the ISFJ, it's a beautiful thing to take meaningful memories from the past and recreate them for the future and keep them alive. They want to give new life to the past and let it keep on living as long as possible. Introverted sensing also tends to give ISFJs a heightened sense of inner body awareness. Every ISFJ I've known has such a strong sense of the nuance of flavors, for example. And sometimes they can be sensitive to really strong, powerful flavors. They also have a very heightened awareness of when they're tired, when they're hungry, when they're thirsty. And they tend to take good care of their physical needs because when they're not feeling great, it affects them very strongly, much more powerfully than it might affect someone like me who's an INTJ, who is a little more out of touch with that introverted sensing part of themselves. Introverted sensing also makes ISFJs very fond of working with small details. This could be sewing, this could be cooking, this could be building with Legos or model building. ISFJs enjoy working with their hands to perfect something, to make it beautiful, to make it interesting. This often gives them a very creative side. Usually this is their introverted sensing side working with their extroverted intuition, which is their inferior function, which don't worry, we'll get into that. As they blend these two functions together, they enjoy coming creative with the world of concrete details, with the world of textures, with fabrics or blocks or recipe ingredients, whatever it is. There's often this desire for ISFJs to create something really perfect and beautiful with their hands. Next, let's talk about the ISFJ's auxiliary function. This function is called Extroverted feeling, or FE for short. Extroverted feeling is all about understanding the emotions and values of the people around you. So people who have extroverted feeling in their function stack tend to have very warm, supportive, empathetic personality types. They tend to know what people emotionally need, and they also tend to know how to influence the emotions of the atmosphere, the room that they're in. Things like good manners, politeness, and tact are all very important to ISFJs. Another quality of extroverted feeling is that it tends to focus on group values. What is best for the group? They also tend to look outside of themselves for what their values should be. This doesn't mean they have no innate inherent values, but they tend to look at social rules. Maybe it could be the rules of their religious institution that they follow. It could be something that they learned in school. It could be something like a proverb or saying that has guided them throughout their life. But they don't tend to just look inside to what feels right for them to guide them in their values. They tend to look at how their decisions are going to affect others. They tend to follow things like the golden rule. Book here called Functions of Type. If you are interested in the cognitive functions, you should definitely check it out. It's by Gary Hartzler and Margaret Hartzler. And I'm going to read just one thing that they said about extroverted feeling. The most basic skill of the guide is what they call extroverted feeling, is to identify group norms and cultural values. For example, when we move into a new community, our guide should focus on identifying what the community expects from us. The guide sometimes absorbs these cultural values as personal values. The FE function usually interprets these values simply as appropriate behavior and attempts to operate in accordance with them. This process encourages the guide part of us to make decisions that attempts to please others and harmonize the group. So one thing that's really important to most ISFJs is to be friendly, conscientious, and supportive and kind. They are going to use good manners. Doesn't matter who they're speaking with, they're going to be as tactful as possible. And they really want to create an atmosphere that is harmonious, where people feel like they can share their lives, where people feel comfortable, safe, and accepted and supported. Now let's talk about the ISFJ's third or tertiary function, which is called introverted thinking, or TI for short. Introverted thinking is very different from extroverted feeling, but it's really the flip side of the coin. Introverted thinking is all about understanding how things work, how ideas, theories, arguments, or even objects come together. It's interested in the principles behind things, the components. So this gives ISFJs a really strong desire to understand what they're interested in depth, more than just on a surface level. For example, I know several ISFJs who are obsessed with sewing, and they know everything there is to know about sewing, everything. And they have all this information about sewing really perfectly categorized in these sewing rooms that they have in their homes. I know other ISFJs who are really interested in the environment and gardening, and they know everything there is to know about gardening, all about how to treat your soil to grow any particular vegetable or flower the best way that it possibly can. These are the ISFJs who are into gardening. I'm not saying this is just a universal ISFJ thing. The point is, whatever they're interested in, they tend to want to know everything about it, down to the basic components. They also tend to have a heightened awareness of things like logical fallacies. Now, you may not know it because they oftentimes they will keep this to themselves because they don't want to upset the harmony. For example, if someone's talking to them and they're using a straw man fallacy to tear someone else's opinion down, someone who isn't even there, the ISFJ may not say something. They don't really want to cause waves, and they don't really want to get into an argument with the other person. And this could be their extroverted feeling side kind of taking the upper hand in that relationship, because when ISFJs are with other people and they're in that extroverted world, extroverted feeling does tend to be in the driver's seat. However, at times that introverted thinking part of themselves does need more room to breathe, and they may find themselves blurting out some criticism of someone's opinion that actually pinpoints the logical fallacy in that opinion. Usually when this happens, the ISFJ is taken aback. They're like, oh gosh, I can't believe that actually came out of my mouth. This is usually something that I keep inside my own head. But this process is constantly going on in the background. Even though ISFJs do seem very warm and accepting and supportive, they do have a very logical inner process that is easily able to pinpoint errors. They just don't tend to give it the driver's seat very often. That said, sometimes ISFJs can enter what's called an SITI loop, where they do become very cold and critical, and they do not seem warm and comforting and supportive and empathetic. Become more reclusive, more pulled away, more detached from their emotions and the emotions of other people, more detached from possibilities. They can enter this SITI loop. And an ISFJ in an SITI loop tends to seem very cold, suspicious, and skeptical. Rather than letting extroverted feeling take the driver's seat in relationships, they've let introverted thinking and introverted sensing take the wheel. And this results in an ISFJ who tends to be very stuck in their own ways. They're not open to trying new things or hearing other perspectives. This ISFJ also tends to be very critical and skeptical because they're letting introverted thinking take the driver's seat. So introverted thinking is just pinpointing all these errors and problems, which is at times good, but in a loop, it's just very chronic, and it's also not grounded with real-world experience, and it's not considering real-world relationships and impacts. So an ISFJ who's in a loop might think, well, my experience has taught me this, and my perspective is this. Therefore, every other perspective is wrong, and then introverted thinking will come in and pinpoint all the potential logical flaws in everything else. Now, ISFJs do need regular bouts of alone time. They need regular time for themselves, whether it's a few hours or even a weekend. They need that. As introverts, that's really important. A loop isn't when an ISFJ takes a little time for themselves. It's when they literally become detached from their extroverted feeling and their extroverted intuition. So they could be around other people, but they just are disconnected. They don't care. They're in their own world. They've burned out themselves so much that they've stopped caring about how they impact other people, what other people's perspectives are, what other possibilities might be out there. They tend to become reclusive and do things the way they've always been done and create these routines that trap them in one specific rut that they can't seem to get out of. I've known quite a few ISFJs and ISTJs who end up in these SI loops, and they tend to stay in their rooms and just do the same things over and over again. I knew an ISFJ who would just watch the same movies over and over again, and she never went out to meet any of her friends. She just cut everyone off, and her life got smaller and smaller and smaller because she did not want to get out of her comfort zone. And when you're an ISFJ and you're really pulling away from everyone else and you're really getting into your comfort zone, it's fine if it's for like a small amount of time. But if you find that your world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, you're losing relationships, you're not even really caring about the effect your actions have on other people, it's very possible that you're in this SITI loop. And I've written more about that. I think I have an article about that, which I will put in the description below. Lastly, let's talk about the inferior function, which for ISFJs is extroverted intuition, or NE for short. Extroverted intuition is all about finding possibilities and exploring new and novel ways of seeing things. It's very good at brainstorming and making connections. But because extroverted intuition is the ISFJ's inferior function, they tend to have a lot of uncertainty around it. It can be very difficult for ISFJs to see their potential or the potential in something. People who have extroverted intuition higher in their stack can often sense lots of possibilities everywhere, all around them for many different things. And they have a lot of fun brainstorming these possibilities. Whereas for ISFJs, brainstorming tends to actually feel exhausting, and it can feel almost like it hurts their head. Dreaming up possibility and potential in something that doesn't even exist right now can feel really overwhelming for them. They're more focused on what has existed, their own past experiences, and what exists in the present. So having to brainstorm, having to dream up possibilities, having to make random connections, this can feel very stressful for them and can actually get them into a state of charged stress. That said, extroverted intuition is still a part of the ISFJ, and they often aspire or wish that they could use it well. In fact, they might daydream about writing these sci-fi novels that unveil a new world in the future. And it's not uncommon for ISFJs to really enjoy fantasy movies or science fiction TV shows or literature and film that helps take their mind to another place that doesn't even exist yet. I know quite a few ISFJs who love the science fiction genre, but it's also something that if they had to create it themselves would take a lot more concerted effort and work and might be really exhausting for them. ISFJs have this dominant introverted sensing, which is very grounded and practical and aware of what's real and the lessons from the past. And it's got this very grounded, stable, responsible tone to it. And then there's extroverted intuition, their inferior function, which is all about exploring what could be, possibilities, new and novel ideas that haven't been explored before. Priority is going to be given to introverted sensing for ISFJs. That's their superpower, is creating stability, creating special rituals and traditions that preserve the past, noticing details, and being pragmatic and responsible. But they also have this quirky, extroverted, intuitive side that does show up from time to time. Often it shows up in kind of offbeat, funny humor. I actually think Steve Carell, who played Michael Scott in The Office, is an ISFJ personality type, and he's a hilarious person. Michael Scott's not ISFJ, by the way. Absolutely not. But I think Steve Carell is ISFJ. And he's this hilarious guy with this really quirky sense of humor, but also in his real life, he's all about preserving these traditions. He created this general store where he lives because he liked the old-timey general stores and that, he grew up with. And is a very warm, supportive, stable, consistent person. You might see glimmers of extroverted intuition in an ISFJ in this really hilarious or quirky or offbeat sense of humor, or you might see it in their hands-on creative projects. For example, I know quite a few ISFJs who have a really hard time getting rid of stuff because they see ways that they could creatively use these things in the future. Like they might keep the acorns that they gathered every fall because they're going to make a bouquet of acorns. They do have this ability to see possibilities, but they're usually applying it to a concrete object. Like, what could I use this random piece of fabric for? Oh, I know, I could make this. What could I add cinnamon to that would make it taste really good? Oh, I know, I could add it to this recipe that doesn't have cinnamon in it, but if I added cinnamon to it, it would be 10 times better than it currently is. They're applying extroverted intuition to their introverted sensing to make these little traditions or make these hands-on projects more beautiful, more rich, and more delectable. So let's go over some signs that you are an ISFJ personality type. 1, you crave stability. As an ISFJ, you like having a sense of what is going to happen. You like having a consistent routine. You don't like it when your life is really chaotic and unpredictable. 2, you experience the present through filters of the past. The past is always there, giving an impression on the present and helping you to see how things have changed, what once was, and how you can bring some of the past into the present to keep it alive. 3, you enjoy creating traditions. You enjoy creating rituals and routines that keep certain patterns alive from the past. So if every Christmas Eve you used to get new pajamas and read a Christmas book with your family growing up, you might reestablish this routine and this tradition in your family, and then your kids might create that tradition or routine in their families, and by this you're creating this magical tradition that is keeping this experience alive for you, and that's really meaningful to you as an ISFJ. 4, you have a strong sense of should or should not. You probably have a lot of values that guide your life, and when you have to make a decision, it's not just about what you want or even what you think is logical all the time. It's what should I do, what shouldn't I do for the welfare of everyone else. 5, you're highly empathic. You tend to know how people are feeling and what they need emotionally, and you really enjoy being able to support, comfort, and nourish your relationships with other people. The only downside to this is that at times it can be hard for you to say no, and you may overextend yourself trying to take care of everyone else and lose sight of what you personally need. So make sure that you're including yourself in that list of people that you are responsible to take care of. 6, when you're stressed out as an ISFJ, you tend to see a lot of negative possibilities. So when ISFJs are really, really deeply stressed for a really intense or prolonged period of time, they tend to fall into the grip of their inferior function, which is extroverted intuition. But it doesn't show up in this fun, excited, inspired way. It's like their brain is drowning them in negative possibilities of things that could go wrong, and they start feeling really panicky and anxious. This is one of the things that can drive them into that SI-FI loop where they just pull away from the world. They get stuck in their routine because it feels safer than all these negative possibilities that could happen. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I have a lot more articles about ISFJs on my website at psychologydunkie.com. I'll also try to post some of those articles in the description, so check below for that. If you'd like to find out more about your personality type or other personality types, please like and subscribe. I have many other videos and will be creating many more videos in the future, and I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have a question. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.